I wiped the sweat from my forehead as I pulled into our driveway, the factory grime still clinging to my work boots. The two-story suburban house loomed before me, a beautiful prison that was draining every cent I made. The evening sun caught our neighbor's Tesla, making me wonder for the 100th time how they afforded it. The smell of takeout Chinese drifted through our front door, but the house was eerily quiet. My boots scuffed against our hardwood floors as I made my way to the kitchen, where Jessica sat scrolling through her phone. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped rhythmically against the screen, each click reminding me of the bills those nails generated. "Hey," I said, trying to inject warmth into my exhausted voice. She barely looked up, just mumbled something that might have been hello. The kitchen counter was cluttered with shopping bags, their designer logos making my stomach clench. I dropped my lunchbox next to the sink, careful not to disturb her latest Amazon packages. "I've been thinking," I started cautiously, "about cutting back on overtime at the factory." That got her attention. Her head snapped up, perfectly shaped eyebrows drawing together. "What do you mean, cutting back?" Her voice had that edge I'd grown to dread. "I've been studying coding online," I explained, "and if I can focus more time on it." "Coding?" she interrupted, setting her phone down. "Mike, we can barely keep up with our bills as it is." I leaned against the counter, suddenly defensive. "That's exactly why I want to make a change, Jess. We got the credit card payment due next week," she said, as if I hadn't spoken. "And Emily just posted about this amazing interior designer." "We can't afford an interior designer," I cut in, immediately regretting my sharp tone. Her face darkened, lips pursing into that familiar pout. "God, Mike, do you want us to live like peasants?" She gestured around our perfectly adequate kitchen, which she'd already remodeled twice in 3 years. "Have you seen Amanda's new house?" "Her husband." "I'm not Amanda's husband," I snapped, the comparison hitting a raw nerve. "Yeah, that's pretty obvious," she muttered, turning back to her phone. I watched her scroll through Instagram, double-tapping photos of luxury vacations and designer handbags. The Jessica I married 5 years ago would have laughed at this version of herself. But that Jessica seemed to have vanished into thin air. "I got accepted into a coding boot camp," I said quietly, pulling the acceptance letter from my back pocket. "It's part-time, 3 nights a week." She didn't even look up. "We can't afford that right now," she said, her voice dismissive. "Actually," I pressed on, "I've been saving for my overtime." That made her pause. "Your overtime money?" she asked incredulously. "I thought that was for my birthday trip to Miami." I felt my jaw tighten. "Jess, we need to think about our future." "I am thinking about our future." She stood up, her designer yoga pants probably worth a week's pay. "Do you know how embarrassing it is?" "What's embarrassing?" I asked, though I knew what was coming. "Everyone else is moving forward, buying bigger houses, starting businesses." She ran her hands through her salon-perfect hair. "And we're stuck here, with you at that disgusting factory." The words hit like physical blows. But I forced myself to stay calm. "The factory paid for this house," I reminded her. "The factory paid for those shoes you're wearing." She glanced down at her new Louboutins, then back at me with defiance. "That's exactly my point, Mike. We should be past this by now." I opened our kitchen drawer, pulling out last month's credit card statement. "You want to talk about being past things?" I spread the paper on the counter. "Explain these charges to me." Her face flushed slightly, but she lifted her chin. "A woman in my position has certain expectations." "Your position?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean your Instagram following?" "I'm building a brand," she shot back. "Those investments will pay off." I pointed to a specific charge. $2,000 at Gucci is an investment. She snatched the statement from my hands. "You don't understand marketing," she said with cold superiority. "My followers expect a certain lifestyle." "Your followers don't pay our bills," I countered. "Neither does your factory job, apparently." She snapped, grabbing her phone. "I'm going out. The girls are meeting for drinks." I watched her gather her things, noting the new handbag she casually slung over her shoulder. We need to talk about this, Jess. No, you need to figure out how to do better, she said, heading for the door. Maybe spend less time on stupid coding classes and more time thinking about our image. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in our beautiful, suffocating house. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulling up our online banking on my phone. The numbers stared back at me, telling a story of spiraling debt and vanishing savings. My overtime money, carefully saved for months, had been steadily disappearing into our joint account. Small transfers, 200 here, 300 there, all withdrawn at boutiques and beauty salons. The coding boot camp acceptance letter sat heavy in my pocket, a promise of escape that seemed to be slipping away. I opened my laptop, logging into the online course I'd been secretly taking. The JavaScript lessons glowed on the screen, offering a lifeline I desperately needed to grab. 3 hours later, my eyes burning from the screen, I heard Jessica's key in the door. She stumbled slightly as she entered, her cheeks flushed from wine and laughter. "You're still up?" she asked, surprised. "Still studying," I replied without looking up. She made a dismissive sound, dropping her bag on the counter. "Am. And his husband just bought her a Range Rover," she announced, watching for my reaction. "Good for Amanda," I muttered, trying to focus on my code. "She said he's looking for investors in his new project." Jessica continued, her voice taking on a familiar, wheedling tone. I finally looked up from my laptop. "We're not investing in anything." "God, you're so negative lately," she huffed, heading for the stairs. "No wonder we're stuck in this rut." I listened to her heels click up the steps, each sound like a hammer on my resolve. Later that night, lying awake in our bed, I could feel the distance between us growing. Jessica scrolled through her phone beside me, the blue light illuminating her perfect profile. I thought about the girl I'd married, the one who used to laugh at pretentious people, the one who loved weekend hikes and picnics, who didn't need designer labels to feel worthy. Somewhere along the way, she'd vanished, replaced by this stranger obsessed with appearances. My phone buzzed with a notification, a reminder about tomorrow's factory shift. Jessica glanced over with barely concealed disdain, then returned to her social media feed. I closed my eyes, exhaustion settling in, but sleep remained elusive. Tomorrow would be another day of physical labor, followed by more coding practice. Something had to change, but I wasn't sure what would break first. Our bank account, our marriage, or my spirit. The next morning came too soon, bringing with it another round of silent tension. Jessica barely acknowledged me as I left for work, too busy planning her day's content creation. The factory's familiar noise greeted me, a symphony of machinery and shouted instructions. My coworker, Dave, noticed my distraction as I nearly missed a safety check. "Woman troubles?" he asked during break, his knowing smile suggesting he'd been there. I nodded, not wanting to elaborate, but Dave wasn't letting it go. "Saw your wife's Instagram yesterday," he said, sipping his coffee. "That new bag she was showing off must have cost a pretty penny." I felt my face heat up, embarrassment mixing with anger. "Everything costs a pretty penny these days," I muttered, avoiding his eyes. Dave leaned back in his chair, his 20 years of marriage wisdom showing. "My Sarah went through a phase like that," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Started comparing our life to everyone else's. Wanted all the fancy things her friends had." I looked up, suddenly interested. "What happened?" Dave's laugh was both bitter and amused. "Reality happened. Credit card companies don't care about keeping up appearances." His words hit uncomfortably close to home, making me think about our own mounting debt. The rest of my shift passed in a blur, my mind spinning with possibilities and fears. When I got home that evening, Jessica was hosting a live Instagram session. She barely glanced my way as I entered, too busy showing off her latest unboxing. I watched from the kitchen doorway as she cooed over another designer purchase. My husband just loves surprising me with gifts. She lied smoothly to her viewers. The comment made my blood boil, but I kept quiet, retreating to our home office. My laptop welcomed me with lines of code, a language that made more sense than my marriage. Hours passed as I immersed myself in programming, trying to ignore the sound of Jessica's voice down the hall. She was still broadcasting when I finally emerged, now talking about luxury vacation destinations. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, wondering how long we could keep up this charade. The answer would come sooner than I expected, but not in any way I could have predicted. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, my mind too restless for sleep. Jessica was still in bed, her face masked in some expensive cream, while I made my way downstairs to check our mail. That's when I saw it, a letter from American Express, the kind that makes your stomach drop. I opened it standing right there in the kitchen, the morning sun casting long shadows across the counter. Payment overdue screamed in bold red letters, followed by a number that made my head spin. $15,000. On a card I didn't even know existed. My hands were shaking as I heard Jessica's footsteps, her designer slippers padding down the stairs. She froze when she saw what I was holding, her perfectly made-up face going pale. I can explain, she started, but I cut her off with a raised hand. $15,000, Jess? My voice was barely above a whisper. It's not what you think, she stammered, reaching for the statement. I was going to tell you. When? I demanded, pulling the paper away. When they started garnishing my wages? She had the grace to look embarrassed, but only for a moment. Everyone uses credit cards, Mike, she said, her tone turning defensive. Amanda's credit limit is twice that. I don't give a damn about Amanda. The words exploded out of me. Or her husband, or their perfect life. Jessica flinched at my outburst, but quickly recovered her composure. Well, maybe you should, she snapped back. Maybe then you'd understand what we're missing out on. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. Missing out on debt? On living beyond our means? She rolled her eyes, reaching for her phone, her eternal escape route from reality. I have a meeting with my followers, she announced, turning away. We can discuss this later. No, I said firmly, blocking her path. We're discussing this now. She tried to step around me, but I stood my ground. How many other cards are there, Jess? Her silence was all the answer I needed. Show me, I demanded quietly. Show me everything. What followed was 2 hours of financial horror, as Jessica reluctantly revealed our true situation. 3MO. Credit cards I didn't know about, all maxed out with designer purchases. A personal loan she'd taken out in both our names, supposedly for her influencer business. The total made me physically ill. Nearly $50,000 in hidden debt. This has to stop, I said finally, my voice hoarse from arguing. We need to return everything you can. Sell what we can't return. Jessica's face contorted with anger. I will not destroy my brand. Your brand, I echoed incredulously. Your brand is killing us. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. You just don't understand. She hissed through clenched teeth. This is an investment in our future. These connections I'm making. Connections? I interrupted. You mean your Instagram followers? They're more supportive than you. She shot back, tears forming. At least they appreciate what I'm trying to build. I ran my hands through my hair, fighting for patience I didn't feel. Those people don't know you, Jess. They don't see our bank statements. She grabbed her purse, another designer piece, and headed for the door. Where are you going? I called after her. To someone who understands me. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with our financial nightmare. I spent the next few hours documenting everything, creating spreadsheets of our debt. My phone buzzed repeatedly with her texts, each one more accusatory than the last. You're ruining everything. Why can't you be more supportive? Amanda's husband never questions her spending. I ignore them all, focusing instead on our brutal reality. That evening, while Jessica was still out, I made two important decisions. First, I applied for a separate bank account, one that would protect my future earnings. Second, I enrolled in the coding boot camp, using the last of my secret savings. When Jessica finally came home that night, she acted as if nothing had happened. She chatted about her day, about her followers' latest comments. I let her talk, watching her move around our kitchen. She was living in a carefully curated fantasy, one that was about to collapse. What I didn't know then was that I had only scratched the surface. The credit cards were just the beginning of a deception that ran much deeper. The next morning, I left for work early, my mind heavy with plans and worries. Dave noticed my mood immediately, offering me a sympathetic coffee. Found out about the cards, huh? He said, surprising me. I looked at him sharply, wondering how he could know. Sarah went through my buddy's savings the same way. He explained, shaking his head. These Instagram wives, man, they're all living in a different world. I sipped my coffee silently, letting his words sink in. What happened to your buddy? I finally asked. Dave's expression turned grim. Lost everything trying to keep her happy. Don't make the same mistake, he advised, patting my shoulder. That afternoon, I received a notification, a charge on our joint account, another $1,000 at Nordstrom, as if our morning confrontation never happened. I stared at my phone in disbelief, watching our account balance plummet. Something inside me snapped, a final thread of patience breaking. I left work early, heading straight to the bank. The process was surprisingly simple, opening my own account. By the time I got home, my next paycheck was safely redirected. Jessica was in our home office, filming another day in the live video. I walked past without a word, ignoring her perfectly scripted monologue. Later, she found me in the garage, where I was sorting through old boxes. Did you cancel our joint account? She demanded, waving her phone. No, I replied calmly. I just opened my own. Her face darkened with anger. You can't do that. Actually, I can, I said, standing up, and I did. She stormed out of the garage, her indignant protests echoing. I continued sorting through boxes, finding old photos from our early days. Jessica and I at the beach, her smile genuine, no filters needed. Us hiking in the mountains, her hair messy, face bare of makeup. What happened to that girl? When did she disappear? The answer would come soon enough, in a way I never expected. But for now, I focused on my task, organizing our past while planning my future. The coding boot camp started next week, and I was ready for change. What I didn't know then was just how much change was coming. The next few weeks settled into an uneasy routine, with Jessica and I barely speaking. I spent my evenings at the coding boot camp, while she hosted her Instagram live sessions. Our house became two separate worlds, connected only by mounting tension. Then one Tuesday evening changed everything. When I came home earlier than usual, the boot camp instructor had called in sick, giving us an unexpected night off. I pulled into our driveway, quietly, noticing Jessica's car was gone. But something fell off. There was a strange phone on our coffee table. It wasn't her usual rose gold iPhone, but a sleek black device I'd never seen. I shouldn't have picked it up, shouldn't have pressed the power button, but something in my gut told me to look, and the phone unlocked with her usual code. What I found made my blood run cold. A dating app, active with messages. Her profile photo was recent, taken in our backyard just last week. Seeking successful, ambitious men. The bio read, making me sick. Life's too short to settle. Ready for an upgrade. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through message after message. Conversations with wealthy men, plans for networking meetups, photos exchanged, promises made. One conversation caught my eye. Dated just yesterday. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Same hotel as last time. I took photos of everything. My law. Your brain finally kicking in? Downloaded the evidence to my phone, including her location history. The front door opened just then, and I heard Jessica's heels on hardwood. I placed the phone exactly where I found it and headed upstairs without a word. She never knew I discovered her secret, never suspected I was building a case. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made an appointment that would change everything. James Morrison's law office was downtown, in a modest building away from the flashy firms. "Tell me everything," he said, his experienced eyes already calculating. I laid it all out. The credit cards, the loans, the dating apps. Showed him the screenshots, the bank statements, the evidence. James leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "You've done well," he said, documenting everything. "Most clients come to me empty-handed, but you've given me ammunition." We spend the next hour planning, creating a strategy for divorce. "Keep playing normal," James advised, "while we get everything in order. Document every purchase, every suspicious absence, and whatever you do, don't let her know you know." I followed his advice perfectly, becoming the world's best actor. Worked my factory shifts, attended my coding classes, pretended not to notice when Jessica came home late, ignored the new purchases, the secret phone conversations. Each piece of evidence went to James, building our case stronger every day. Meanwhile, Jessica grew bolder, thinking she had me fooled. Going to a marketing event, she'd say, "Dressed to kill." Meeting some investors, while her dating app pinged. I watched her lies multiply, like cancer cells spreading. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Then came the night that sealed it, when everything fell perfectly into place. Jessica had announced another networking event, wearing a dress that cost more than my weekly pay. I tracked her phone's location, right to the Marriott downtown. Hired a private investigator James recommended, who photographed everything. Her meeting her latest investor. In the hotel lobby, their intimate dinner, where his hand kept finding hers. The elevator ride up to a room he'd already booked. 3 hours later, she came home, smelling of expensive cologne. "How was the networking?" I asked casually. "Productive," she smiled, never suspecting I knew. I nodded and went back to my laptop, where I was finishing my final coding project. The boot camp was almost over, and I'd already had 3 job interviews. Life was about to change, in ways Jessica couldn't imagine. I waited 2 more weeks, gathering the last pieces of evidence. Let her dig herself deeper, with every lie, every meeting. Then one morning, as she prepared for another Instagram live session, I placed the envelope on her vanity, right next to her makeup brushes. "What's this?" she asked, barely glancing at it. "Divorce papers," I said calmly, watching her face in the mirror. She laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Then she opened the envelope, and her world collapsed. Page after page of evidence, laid out in legal terminology. Photos, bank statements, screenshots. Her double life exposed. "You can't," she whispered, her face draining of color. "You can't do this to me." But I already had. Her phone started ringing, her followers waiting for their daily show. But Jessica just sat there, staring at her shattered reflection. I left her there, heading to my first day at my new job. The tech company had offered me a position, paying twice what I made at the factory. As I drove away, I could see her in the window, still holding the divorce papers. The perfect facade had finally cracked, revealing the emptiness behind it. The story wasn't over yet. There would be court battles ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from the lies, the debt, the pretense, and the pain of watching someone I loved become someone I couldn't recognize. The coding boot camp had saved more than my career. It had given me the strength to start over. The divorce proceedings hit Jessica like a tsunami. destroying everything she'd carefully constructed. James Morrison proved to be worth every penny. As he methodically presented our case, the courtroom was silent, as evidence mounted against her. Bank statements showing hidden accounts, credit cards opened without my knowledge, photos from the private investigator, documenting her hotel networking meetings, screenshots of dating app conversations, proving her infidelity beyond doubt. Jessica's lawyer looked increasingly desperate as each new piece of evidence emerged. My client was merely building business connections. He argued weakly to the judge. But the hotel receipts told a different story, as did the intimate text messages. The judge's face grew sterner with each revelation of deception. Jessica sat there, perfectly groomed as always, but her Instagram-ready facade was cracking. When they brought up the loan she'd taken, using my name without permission, she finally broke down, mascara running down her cheeks. I was trying to build something, she sobbed to the unsympathetic court. Everyone else had such perfect lives. I just wanted what they had. The judge's response was ice cold, cutting through her practiced tears. What you wanted, Mrs. Thompson, was to live a lie at your husband's expense. The final judgment came down hard, stripping away her carefully built illusions. All debt in her name would remain hers, including the secret credit cards. The house would be sold to pay off her joint obligations. Her precious designer collection would need to be liquidated. I sat there watching it all unfold, feeling strangely empty inside. The woman I once loved so deeply now seemed like a stranger. As we left the courthouse, Jessica tried one last time. Mike, please, she begged. We can fix this. But I just walked past her, toward my new life. My coding job was going well, each day bringing new challenges and growth. The salary was more than enough to start rebuilding my life. I found a small apartment downtown, close to the tech district. No designer furniture or luxury brands, just clean, simple comfort. Meanwhile, Jessica's world imploded in spectacular fashion. Her Instagram followers watched in real time as her perfect life disintegrated. The designer bags disappeared from her posts, sold to pay her mounting legal fees. Her luxury car repossessed, replaced by public transportation. Her friends slowly vanished. Once the truth came out, Amanda, with her perfect life, stopped accepting her calls. The wealthy men from the dating apps lost interest when her money dried up. She had to take a job at the mall, selling the designer clothes she once flaunted. Karma, as they say, can be brutally poetic. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into her at a coffee shop. She looked different without the expensive clothes and carefully curated appearance, almost like the girl I'd first met before the obsession with status took over. How are you? She asked quietly, clutching her basic coffee cup. Good, I replied honestly. Really good, she nodded, looking down. I see your company's doing well. She'd been following my LinkedIn, watching my career progress. I was wrong, she said suddenly, about everything. But it was too late for apologies, too late for reconciliation. I wished her well and walked away. Toward my next meeting, my team was launching a new project, and I was leading the development. Life had moved on in ways neither of us expected. Later that night, in my apartment, I scrolled through some old photos, found one from our first date at that simple pizza place. Jessica's genuine smile. No filters, no pretense. I wondered when exactly she'd lost herself in the pursuit of artificial perfection. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own path to follow. The coding boot camp had given me more than just technical skills. It had shown me that real change comes from genuine growth, not from designer labels or carefully curated social media posts. My phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, a developer I'd been seeing. Still on for hiking tomorrow? She asked, making me smile. She was everything Jessica wasn't. Authentic, ambitious in the right ways. We'd met at a coding meetup, bonding over bug fixes and coffee. She didn't care about Instagram followers or what brand of clothes I wore. Instead, we talked about technology, shared dreams of building something meaningful. As I replied to her message, I felt grateful for everything that had happened. The pain of betrayal had led to growth. The end of one life had opened another. Sometimes rock bottom becomes a solid foundation. I closed my laptop, ready for whatever came next. The future wasn't perfect, but it was authentically mine. No filters needed, no pretense required. Just real life, with all its messy beauty. And that, I'd learned, was worth more than any designer label. The story of Mike and Jessica Thompson became a cautionary tale in our social circle about the price of artificial perfection and the value of authentic living. But for me, it was simply the beginning of a life lived on my own terms, one line of code at a time, one genuine moment after another, building something real in a world of filters and facades. And that's a success story worth more than all the Instagram likes. In the digital universe,